We are hearing reports that the remains of many people are still unaccounted for.
Yeah, we heard from one group of international observers today that said that they were told that those trains we saw leave the station a couple days back at the crash site were told they contained 260 bodies, which would leave 38 people unaccounted for. But they were told that because they weren't allowed to verify it themselves. In other words, the international observers didn't count the bodies at the site, so they can't even be sure. And we've also heard some disturbing reports today from observers that there are still some remains actually lying on the ground at the crash site. We heard the Australian Prime Minister today say he's concerned if more pressure isn't put on the Russian president to provide more access to the crash site, then those remains may never actually make it back.
Ryan, 2 Ukrainian fighter jets were shot down today. You were just talking about pressure on President Putin. Does this put more pressure on him?
You know, quite possibly, if for no other reason than the optics of it don't look good, right? There's supposed to be a de-escalation, not an escalation with fighter jets getting shot down. But the issue here is really, I think, in a technical sense, at what altitude those planes were flying at. The higher the altitude, the greater the likelihood that sophisticated technology was involved that could only really come from Russia. And the more that means more pressure on Putin to curb the flow of it. So the Ukrainians said that those fighter jets that were shot down today were up at about 15,000 feet, which is about half the altitude that flight MH17 was flying at. Nonetheless, it's pretty high, and naturally people are going to be looking to see if the weapons that brought those down came from Russia, or if possibly they could have come from Ukrainian stockpiles when those were raided a few months back.
Ryan, the European Union ministers, they met yesterday. There was talk about sanctions targeting specific Russian citizens and companies. What can you tell us about it?
Well, the upshot of yesterday's EU meeting was really that they did nothing yet, but they agreed to do something. So far, you know, I mean, there's no real good mathematic way to do this, but I would estimate they've done about a third of what the U.S. has done. But it looks like, based on what they said yesterday, they intend to close the gap over the next few weeks. If you think about it, 28 countries involved, and their vested interests when it comes to Russia are much greater than the U.S.'s, which has a much smaller economic relationship with Russia. So I guess, relatively speaking, that's progress.